Hey there, and welcome to another weekly news recap here on Bald Prairie Real Estate, where we go through the most interesting news articles this past week in the Canadian real estate market, and I give you my thoughts and opinions on it. My name is Matthew Pfeifer from Royal LePage Regina, and that is my trusted assistant, 𝗤𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲. This week, we're going to be going through talking about Canada's inflation rate, how it's going to impact interest rates, what's going on with population, because we've seen a huge surge in immigration in Canada. We'll be talking about some new news for variable rate mortgage holders, and what I think is going completely under the radar, but it's a massive change coming to Realtor.ca that's going to help out first-time home buyers, actually just home buyers in general. I think this is a big change that nobody's talking about. But as always, let's start off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. What is the best way to always remember your wife's birthday? Just forget it once and you'll never forget again. Now don't worry, my wife approved this joke, but if you have a great joke I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into this week's news. I like to start off these weekly news recaps with a quick informational piece, and this week I want to talk about appraisals, and more specifically, what happens when an appraisal comes in lower than the agreed purchase price. So this is often where whether you as the buyer have requested to have the house appraised, or your lender has asked as part of the mortgage approval to have an appraisal on the property, and it comes in lower than the agreed purchase price. First, you can't force the seller to sell it for the appraisal price. You can go and ask to renegotiate, but they're under no obligation to meet that appraisal price. They can ask whatever purchase price they want. So you're basically left with two choices at this point. You can walk away from the deal saying, the appraiser says it's not worth what I've agreed to, and I no longer want to buy this purchase or this property anymore. That, of course, is if you made a conditional offer. The second is maybe you still want to buy the property. There's lots of reasons why somebody would. Maybe it's a unique location that they cannot find anywhere else, or some other very specific reason, and they understand that they're paying more potentially than what it's worth because it's been appraised at a lower value. Well, in that case, the buyer then has to come up with the difference. So we'll just go easy numbers here. The appraisal came in at $500,000 and the agreed purchase price was $525,000. You as the buyer would have to come up with the additional $25,000 in order to make that transaction happen and have that home be purchased. The first article here comes from BNN, and Canada just set a new record for population growth. 292,000 people called Canada their new home in just the first 3 months of the year. That is a new record pace for immigration that we haven't seen in Canada since before the First World War. From about 2000 to 2015, the average in an entire year for immigration was about 250,000. In fact, in that almost 20-year span, not a single year did we see more than 270,000 people call Canada their new home. And now in just the first 3 months of the year, 292,000 people are now calling Canada their new home. Now, not only does that mean a significant pressure on Canada's rental market, we've seen how much the price of rent has gone up recently, it also puts a significant pressure on inflation, because as people move to Canada, when the population grows, they come to Canada, they buy vehicles, they get clothing, furniture, they go find a place to live, whether they're renting or buying. All of that consumer spending feeds into Canada's CPI calculation and drives up inflation. So the Bank of Canada, which is trying really hard to push down inflation through higher interest rates, is fighting against the Government of Canada, which is trying to bring in a significant number of people to fill a labor shortage that we have. They're basically fighting against each other right now. Here's another article from BNN, and the survey says the Bank of Canada will not raise its overnight rate above 5%. Now, as I've said with any forecast, please don't make a buying decision based on a forecast, because not only can and will these forecasts change as information changes. If your plan to buy a house, whether it's a good idea or a good purchase, is predicated on that forecast coming true, that's not a great plan going forward. So again, use these for informational, educational purposes. Don't make a buying decision based on what the prediction or forecast of something is going to be. Now, this survey was actually done before the most recent inflation data came out, and I have a feeling if they did this survey again, now that that data is out, there would be even more economists expecting the Bank of Canada would not raise rates above 5%. Right now, most people are still expecting the Bank of Canada in July to raise interest rates another quarter point to get to 5%. Now, before this survey, or before the most recent inflation data was out, about 75% chance, that was what was expected, the Bank of Canada would raise interest rates that quarter point to 5%. And of course, it's changed significantly. I'll be talking about that in the inflation section of this news update. I'll be talking about that in just a minute here. This is an article from the Financial Post, and Canadian homeowners are fleeing variable rate mortgages. This shouldn't be a surprise at all with how much interest rates have gone up. There's not a lot of home buyers that are really interested at looking at variable rates right now. They've seen how much they have gone up in just the past year, and they're saying, nope, I'm going to go the conservative option, take my fixed rate, which is right now lower than variable rate mortgages, and I'm going to know what my payment's going to be for the next 5 years, or whatever the term they select is. Typically, about 75% of Canadians take fixed rate mortgages, about 25% will take variable rates. In early 2022, that number had increased to about 55% of home buyers were looking at variable rates. This was, of course, when variable rates were really low, like 1.4% roughly. And the Bank of Canada was still saying, don't worry, interest rates will remain low for a very, very long time.
Interest rates are very low, and they're going to be there for a long time.
And then, of course, now they've gone up to what is likely we're going to see pretty soon, 5% for the Bank of Canada overnight rate, meaning that variable rates are, at 6, 6.5, 7%, depending on the lender right now. That is, of course, a whole lot higher than what it was just over a year and a half ago. And of course, there's a lot of conversations right now about what's going to happen when all the people who did sign those really ultra low fixed rate mortgages, when they have to renew in 3, 4, 5 years. Well, you can actually say in some ways, potentially the same thing about those buying a house right now. When they go to renew, they potentially could be in a lower interest rate environment when they actually go to renew that mortgage. Of course, nobody can predict the future, but it's just an interesting way to look at it. The newest inflation data is out, and it did surprise the market a little bit. We saw last month where the inflation rate went from 4.3 to 4.4%, and the Bank of Canada did use that increased inflation as one of the justifications for raising interest rates here in June. Well, now we've seen that headline inflation number drop from 4.4% to 3.4%. That's obviously a very significant drop and continues this trend that we've seen now for essentially a year of the inflation rate trending back down. Bank of Canada wants to see that between 1 and 3%. 2.5% is kind of their ideal target where they'd like things to be, and we continue to trend towards that. In fact, if you take out interest rates, how much those have gone up, because that has increased inflation. That accounts for about 30% of the total inflation now. If you take those out, I know it's not realistic, but just take it out, hear me out here for a second. You know what Canada's inflation rate would be without higher interest rates? 2.5%, exactly where the Bank of Canada wants them to be. And when you look at that core inflation number, that's what the Bank of Canada has been saying they're leaning on significantly. Well, the expectation was that that would come in at about 3.9%. The previous month it was 4.1%. It came in lower at 3.7%. So all in all, we saw inflation drop more than the market was expecting. I still don't think that this is going to dissuade the Bank of Canada from raising interest rates in July. Like I said earlier, before the inflation data came out, there was about a 75% chance that the Bank of Canada was going to raise interest rates. That has now dropped to about 62%. That's kind of the betting odds right now on whether the Bank of Canada will raise interest rates in July. Now I want to talk about what I think is the biggest news this past week, and that is that the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors is going to make sold prices available on Realtor.ca. This, I think, is a huge change, and I'm really surprised that this has not been talked about in the media very much, and I get why. Of course, it's Nova Scotia that's doing this, isn't the Toronto Real Estate Board. If it was, this would be all over the news. But I do believe this is the start of a trend that we're going to see across Canada. So what the association at Nova Scotia is going to do is when a house is for sale, it is going to display, just like it normally does in Realtor.ca, what the asking price is. And when it goes conditional, it's now going to display as conditionally sold. Then when it sells, it is now going to change from basically a listing page to a property information page. And part of that information is going to be what the sold price was. So you, as somebody who's kind of watching the market, will be able to keep an eye on a property, and when it sells, you'll know exactly what it's sold for. Now, what I'm trying to figure out, and I'm waiting for some more clarification on that, is will it show just the most recent sale price? That's what I believe they're going to do. I'm hoping, though, that we'll potentially have the ability to show a history of sale prices so you can see what this house is sold for over the years. This, I think, is a really beneficial tool for buyers. They can keep an eye on properties and see what they sold for. If you lose out on a house in multiple offers per se, you will know that potentially somebody paid more than you. You also know potentially if somebody paid less than you. Of course, that sometimes happens. Maybe the sellers liked that offer better for whatever reason. But all in all, this is more information for buyers. It's a good thing. It makes the real estate market in Canada more transparent, which everybody, including myself, has been asking for. And I think this is a trend that is going to continue across the country. When it's going to hit the mainstream news is when the Toronto or the Vancouver Real Estate Board decide that they're going to make sale prices publicly available. That's when you're going to be hearing about this a lot more. But since you're watching this now, you're getting the inside track and you're going to know about this probably before most people do. And when you're looking to buy a house, of course, you're going to want to know what the property is sold for around you. So this is awesome. But if you are thinking about buying a house, the other thing you need is a great real estate agent. And if you don't already have one and you want me to give you my personal recommendation for a great real estate agent in your market, in the description of this video, there's a link to my calendar where you can book me in for a buyer's consultation. I'm going to learn about what you're looking for in a property, but also in a real estate agent, and then get you paired up with the best real estate agent for you in your market. If you like this video, please give this video a like, hit the subscribe button if you love learning about the Canadian real estate market, leave comments below so we can chat in the comments section below, and as always, thanks very much for watching.